Hey everyone, welcome to Divorcing Today. Now what with John Pedagakos and Jennifer. Today we have an exciting show with Dani Frodis. He is a lawyer and he's going to give us some amazing information and very sensible information is what I'm told. Anything to add, Ms. Jennifer?
Well, Danny's a fantastic family lawyer, but he's also a fantastic person. He is a very knowledgeable lawyer. He's calm, he's kind, and I always feel that if there's anything that I need to ask him, he's always right there with a response. And I find that very rare in lawyers, especially. And I would definitely recommend Danny for anybody who needs some representation.
Well, I'm looking forward to listening to what he has to share and what he will be explaining to our viewers. And yeah, it'll be an exciting show. Let us know what you think.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Divorcing Today, Now What? Today, I am pleased to announce that we have Dani Frodis with us, who is a fantastic family lawyer. And I know several people who he has really helped through this difficult process. So welcome to the show, Dani.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
When in the process do clients come to you? When's the best time for them to come and seek your services?
You know, it's interesting. People come to me sometimes when they're just thinking about separating and they think they may want to try to plan a little bit. Those make me a little bit uncomfortable, but you do what you got to do. And there are people that come to me after they've either heard that their spouse wants to separate or they're the one that wants to declare the marriage at an end and they need some help with that process. But pretty much at any time. We often also get people that have been to other lawyers and for whatever reason that relationship doesn't work out, so they want to change. So they come over and we get what I'll call refugees from other lawyers coming over every so often.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So I don't really know you. I've had the pleasure of having one or two conversations with you, and you're very generous with your time and very appreciative of it. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I like to think of myself as pragmatic, as approachable, and I want to achieve a result that makes sense for, I'll call it the family, because ultimately we're dealing with families breaking up, but they are still parts of a family even after they're separated. So I'm trying to help people achieve what works in the long term in a reasonable way. It's not always possible, and I think what differentiates our firm from others, in part, or one of the things that does, is that we don't shy away from going to court. If I need to, if I've got sort of an unreasonable position being put forward by the other side, we'll go to court. And generally the results that we get are consistent with what we kind of tell our clients by way of what they should expect. You know, part of the process is setting realistic expectations, but also then sticking to them and making reasonable offers to settle. You know, I like to say that out of the 100+ trials that we've done, I used to only have one where we didn't beat our offer. I now have two where we didn't beat our offer, but we were close. And but it's still, in my view, where out of that many, you know, opportunities to roll the dice, so to speak, because you don't really know what the outcome is going to be at a trial. Where we've only twice not beaten our offer to settle, suggests that we're trying to be reasonable. We're not putting positions forward that we think a court's going to look at and say, that's unreasonable. That is not realistic. Your expectations are not appropriate. So with that in mind, we don't worry too much about going to court because we get nice results typically. Once we have enough information, it's not that uncommon to know where this is going to wind up. It's just how you get there. And, you know, clients will ask me, you know, how much is it going to cost? And I'll say, well, I don't know. You can get to, you know, the end point either in a straight line, which means it'll cost a bit less, or you can kind of screw around and get there in a very protracted and circuitous way, and it will cost a lot more. But it's up to the people generally how they want to approach it. Costs of these trials are horrendous, and if you're not beating your offer, often you're looking at then paying the other side significant legal fees. And it's financially ruinous for most families. Normal people can't really afford to go through that process and survive it financially.
In your experience, what would the advice that you would be giving to clients be if they came to you first time and said, what can you tell me? What can you educate me with?
It depends on the situation. I start with a kind of a very general, if it's an initial consultation, I start with, these are the kind of three main areas that you need to resolve. There are kid issues, if there are children, there are support issues, and there are property issues. And overall, they're generally speaking relatively straightforward, all those issues. People have complicating features in each of their cases, but for the most part, there's nothing that complicated or that unusual that we haven't seen that can't be resolved. What makes it difficult is either somebody withholding information, whether it's your own client or the other side, or not accepting the reality of the position or the situation that they're in, and having unrealistic expectations of what the outcome is going to be. And in those cases, you need to kind of either strong arm them into it. And if it's my client, I will push very hard for people to accept the reality of what I believe is reality. People pay me a lot of money, and they don't pay me just to be an advocate. They pay me to be an advisor. I'm a counselor, not just a barrister, so to speak. So part of that job is to advise what I think is a likely outcome, what's realistic to happen. And frankly, we have an obligation under the rules that govern our conduct. We have an obligation to suggest compromise. And a compromise may be a very, not only realistic, but a very good outcome for people, because the alternative is spending a huge amount on your lawyer, potentially paying the other lawyer's fees too, and having an outcome that's worse than what you could have compromised for. So people really need to understand that. And if they don't, then A, the lawyer's not doing their job well, but B, they're also not being realistic.
So what would you say some of the biggest mistakes, other than following the advice of a professional, is that a lot of people face? Common mistakes or mistakes that you see that you can share with us?
Mistakes by lawyers or mistakes by parties?
Oh, good question. So we'll start with parties.
So people going through this generally are going through a very, very difficult time in their life. And they're going to react emotionally, they're going to react instinctively. And often those reactions and those, their immediate kind of wish to scratch a particular itch is not the right approach. It often has negative implications for themselves, negative implications for their children. And I view my role as telling them, this is not a wise course to follow. If you do this, this is what's likely to happen. Now, often they ignore that. I shouldn't say often, but sometimes they come to me having already done something unwise. And then they say, well, how do I fix this? So those situations can be difficult because I can't undo the past. And I like to say to my clients, I'm a pretty good lawyer. I'm a really lousy magician. So I cannot undo what's been done. I can't change the past. And I can't really make things happen in the future that are not realistic. But that said, people will send emails that are horrific in certain situations. People will say things to their children that are grossly inappropriate. People will use their children as pawns. They'll say, you didn't pay me my support, I'm not letting you see the kids next week. And those are not appropriate responses or reactions to what's going on in the case. And the courts look at them very negatively. So you try to avoid those kinds of things and hopefully prevent them from happening in the first place, so that you don't then have to explain it to a judge. This is why my client behaved this way, and we're sorry. You know, other times it's sometimes easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission, but that saying has very significant limitations in the court of law. So you got to be careful with that.
So it's almost like before you write that email or that text, or maybe opening up your mouth, take a deep breath, take a step back, maybe sleep on it, and then.
Yeah, I've had emails where I'm about to hit send. I said, I'm going to wait an hour before I hit send because I want to see how I feel in a little while. Or I run it by one of my associates and say, can I send this email? And they'll look at it. No, Danny, you that email, that's going to land you in a lot of hot water. So I don't do that. But clients often don't have that
sensor,
either the time or the buffer or the insight. And, it used to be cases by oral evidence. Now it's cases by email, cases by posts on Instagram or Facebook. When you're saying you don't have any money on the one hand, and you're posting yourself on vacation driving a Ferrari somewhere, somebody's going to find that. And that's going to wind up in court materials. And the judge is going to look at you and say, you just swore in your affidavit you got no money, but here you are somewhere in the world that is obviously, maybe in the pandemic it's harder to do, but somewhere in the world where it clearly appears that you've got money to spend. So be careful what you're doing out there, because it'll all come back to bite you, and you don't want to do that.
I love your calm demeanor and the way that this is how you always are. And, for people who don't know you, I think that whenever people are going through the situation, it's a very high stress and scary time. And dealing with someone like you, Dani, in their corner is so fantastic, because you really give that sense of calm and strength, which is a great combination. And I really have always appreciated that about you.
Thank you. And without tooting my own horn, we all have certain strengths and gifts, I'll call them. And I've come to realize that is one of my strengths, let's say, one of my strengths, that I don't get flustered, I don't get too excitable, and it helps the client stay calm. Because if I'm nervous and uptight, and the reaction or the interaction between me and my client is kind of a stressful one, it just heightens the tension and creates a very difficult situation for the client. Court is stressful, there's no doubt, but I actually enjoy going and I have fun there typically. And it rubs off on the client. Most clients, when we go to court, feel quite at ease because I'm at ease. And it's funny hearing from clients who've had other lawyers say, I was in court with lawyer X and now I'm in court with you, and it's a completely different experience. And the facts haven't changed. The judge is still the same judge, but something is different. And it's just something that, who knows? It works well for me, and I'm thankful for it. But it is something that I've come to realize is useful in this line of work anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You're definitely not adding fuel to the fire, which is amazing.
Yeah. I try not to, because there's enough fuel there anyway without the lawyer adding to it.
When you touched on mediation, it's almost like there's another voice there that is telling your client, or both clients for that matter, the exact same thing or something very similar that the two reasonable lawyers have been telling them all along, which I think is also beneficial.
Or sometimes just another pair of eyes puts a new spin on it and finds a more creative solution, or a different creative solution that is palatable for the clients. Just because I've seen different scenarios and come up with certain creative opportunities or approaches doesn't mean that I've thought of everything. Mm-hmm. And having one more person look at it and say, well, how about this? Great idea. Let's look at it that way. So there are many ways of looking at things, and I don't pretend to know all of it or to come up with everything. So having that extra, kind of person thinking about the problem often helps.
So our show is Divorcing Today, Now What? And the purpose for that is to allow people to understand the process in a little more detail, to where they're supposed to go after each step. So where do you usually direct your clients after they've been with you? So now that they have a separation agreement settled, what's the next step?
So it depends. I mean, everybody's different. So, earlier on in the process, I might recommend that people go talk to financial people so that either they can get help preparing their financial statements, or they can, if they need help, if they've gotten a chunk of money that they need to deal with and invest so that it doesn't just disappear in 3 months, talk to somebody who can help them invest and use it in a way that will prolong that money and help them live. Sometimes I'll send people for counseling because they're dealing with issues that, they may want to talk to me about it, but I say to them, I'm A, bad at this, and B, expensive for what you're talking to me about. So go talk to a counselor who's got the training, who's going to cost you less, and likely give you better advice than I can give you. I might have good advice because I've been doing this a long time, but I'm not the expert in that field to offer that kind of advice. So counseling might be useful. People often have very dysfunctional relationships with their spouses or former spouses, and they're hoping, because they are eternal optimists, that their spouse is going to change. And now that they're separated, their spouse is going to do things better or right or differently in some way. And I usually say to them, that's nuts. Your spouse is not likely to change. And if you are having difficulty dealing with this particular form of behavior, you need to deal with how you're dealing with it rather than expecting them to change. Because sending emails back and forth telling them what an idiot they are, it's not going to change their behavior. It's simply going to ramp things up and not allow you to move forward in any meaningful or productive way. So you can only control what you do. You can't control what other people do. So learn to deal with the crap that's coming from the other side, because if you don't, you're going to be driving yourself crazy the rest of your life, or at least as long as you got to interact with that person. And if you have little kids, you're going to be interacting with that person for a long time. So there are going to be issues that come up, and you need to figure out how to deal with them.
Great.
Well, I think that's and I think that's a good message, right? And then Dani, this has been really, like, I've learned a lot, and it's been really, really good and informative. How does someone get in touch with you? So if someone's listening to this or watching this is like, hey, I like this guy, and I think I have a values match, and I'd like to get in touch with them. How does someone contact you?
So our office is still open. So the first easiest way is our phone, which is 416-218-8888. We have a website, frodislaw.ca. And our contact information is on our website. So in terms of our address, we're at Yonge and Sheppard. All of our contact information, our email addresses, and so on. So those are generally the easiest ways of getting in touch, I would think.
Great.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, Dani, for joining us today and for your wonderful information that you've passed on. And I look forward to speaking with you in the near future.
Thank you. This was great. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks. This is awesome.
Okay. Well, that was great. I'm really glad to have heard his perspective. There's different ways to approach any situation, and the collaborative approach is great for people. And also, if someone is going to need to go to court, it is important to have a lawyer that you know who's going to advocate for you. So it's important to know the different types of lawyers out there and who's best suited for you.
Absolutely, and I think that everyone that we've had on the show today, including Dani, they talk from a place of really good experience, and they really want to do what's best for their clients. Mm-hmm. They don't want to add fuel to the fire.
I really loved actually that Dani mentioned going to see a counselor. Sometimes he would recommend that after he's completed everything he needs to do with the client, because it's so true. So many people that are going through this need to continually help themselves so they're able to move on after this. It doesn't just end after the contract signed. It's now, how are you going to continue living your life in the best way? And I think that was fantastic advice.
Yeah, and really good that he's able to recognize that, right? And he's like, hey, you know what, you can talk to me, but I'm probably not the right person to be giving you this type of advice. Mm-hmm. Let's talk to someone who's more cost effective. I'm a lawyer, I do the law, awesome. Yeah. Here's a counselor, and they're better suited in this situation.
Yeah. Well, all in all, great show. And I was really glad to have Dani participate with us. And I'm looking forward to our next episode on Divorcing Today with Jennifer and John. Now what?